everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience Live. I'm your host, Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Russell Glasser.
Hey, Matt. Great to be here.
We had some changes in co-hosts and shuffling around, and today's show is going to be considerably different than past shows. Our guest today, who I'm going to go ahead and introduce real quick, is Ray Comfort. Ray, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Matt. It's great to be here.
Obviously, we have different perspectives about reality. You have within your worldview, or maybe coloring your entire worldview, is this idea that a God exists, particularly the God as represented in the Bible, and I do not. Now, considering that we have a different view about this, what is the best method to resolve that, to come to some agreement about what is truth?
Well, I don't know if you could put your finger on what is truth. I can, as a Christian, I can say I found absolute truth. Jesus said, I am the truth. And I don't know if any atheist can point to some atheist that said that, or point to anything that you can say this is absolute reality. For you, the whole thing could be an illusion.
So, Ray, I could do that right now, but you wounn't believe me.
Okay, give me a try.
Okay, I am the way. Everything I say is true.
Yeah, okay.
So
now resurrect yourself from the dead and I'll believe you.
Well, how do you know that happened?
Well, the thing is, for a Christian, we're not going by a belief. We're going by the power of God. Before I was a Christian, I believed in Jesus. I believed that he was an historical figure. But on the night of my conversion, I came to know him, whom the Bible says to know is life eternal. So just as far more real than I know my wife is my walk with Christ. It's my very life itself. So when Jesus said, I am the life, he means he is the very source of life. He's the substance of life that became a human being for the specific purpose of destroying death for humanity.
Sure. So, but from an external point of view, we're still dealing with a claim. You are making an appeal to some experience that you've had, which testifies to the reality of it for you. And what I'm asking is, absent that experience, how could anybody else possibly know? Could they be justified? Well,
that's a good question. It's like if you didn't believe in electricity because you can't see it, hear it, touch it, taste, or smell it.
Believe in what? Sorry?
If you didn't believe in electricity.
Oh.
Because it's an invisible force. And I said, yeah, hey, take this fork, stick up this light socket, and you'll more than believe. You'll experience his power. And that's what happens when someone truly becomes a Christian. They move out of the realm of intellect into the realm of personal experience. They don't just believe, they know experientially about the power of God, and that's the power that God puts behind the gospel.
Now, wait a minute. I want to back up a minute, because you said that it would move out of the realm of intellect, but that makes it not a good analogy to electricity, like you just said, right? Because the realm of intellect is exactly how we know all the details of how electricity works.
Yeah, but you don't experience it. There's a difference between an intellectual acknowledgement, electricity is real, and actually feeling its power through your body.
Right. So you're still appealing to the primary, I guess, the primary proof, for lack of a better word, is direct experience. And I'm just asking you, are you then conceding that absent that direct experience, people wouldn't be justified in believing?
No, not when it comes to the existence of God. All you need is eyes that can see it, a brain that works. You look at creation and say there's a creator. But what atheists do, or should I say the new atheists or contemporary atheists, they say there's no creation. That denotes a creator, and that denotes a moral responsibility. So we just call it nature. And nature created itself, which is unreasonable, makes no sense. Something cannot create itself.
Yes, that statement is nonsensical. Nature created itself. There's a number of errors in grammar there. You can't just call something creation in order to say, I'm going to call this creation, therefore it had to have a creator. Obviously, if it's a creation, it had to have a creator.
Right.
But it's not necessarily creation. You haven't demonstrated that. You've just simply asserted that it's a creation. And the thing that you're objecting to about saying nature created itself, that's more of a grammatical problem, because the idea isn't that nature created itself as some kind of thoughtful act. It's that that existence doesn't necessarily require the creator that you claim it does.
Well, you tell me what was in the beginning without saying I don't know.
Well, why can't I say I don't know?
Because that's ignorance. And you can't have that as an atheist.
Well, yes, you can, because atheists aren't asserting absolute certainty or knowledge or any of that stuff.
Well, Christians do, because they know that there's a creation and there's a creator.
Sure,
certainly
but
Christians assert that.
asserting knowledge is different from demonstrating that this knowledge is true.
Well, you see, I don't need to demonstrate to a reasonable person that a painting had a painter.
Right. Do you know why?
Tell me why.
Because we recognize that a painting had a painter, not because it's complex, not because it's ordered. We recognize this from experience. All evidence points to this thing having or being designed. Okay, we recognize design by contrasting it with what is naturally occurring, and that's why you can hold up a painting and a tree side by side, and you would say, "Oh, the painting is obviously the creation of an intelligent mind," because we have no examples of paintings coming into existence on their own. We have no examples of paintings being able to reproduce. All evidence, we have millions of examples of paintings created by thinking minds. So all of the evidence points to this. The contrast, though, is that trees do naturally reproduce, as do people and living things. We have a good understanding of how planets form out of accretion disks from suns. Those things are naturally occurring. That contrast between naturally occurring and created is something that is how we determine whether or not something was designed. And what you're doing is kind of like, you're familiar obviously with Haley's watchmaker analogy, where you find a watch and its intricate workings supposedly lead one to deduce that it was designed. But in reality, what you have is a watch lying on a field of watches in a universe of watches, because you believe everything is designed. So there is no point of contrast for you.
What you believe, if I'm getting it rightly, is that you believe everything has a semblance of design. From the atom through to the universe, it seems to be designed. There's order. There's not chaos.
No, I wouldn't say it seems to be designed, because I was specifically saying that design is contrasted against naturally occurring. Order itself is not necessarily a product of design. Sand dunes in the desert look very orderly, but they're not designed, and they don't give. Not everything gives the impression of design, and those things which do give the impression of design aren't necessarily designed.
People have, for a very long time, described things as appearing to be designed, because the way people learn in general is to make analogies to things that they already know. So when we say how the eye works, we tend to describe it in terms of things that we know how they already work, like a camera. But that doesn't mean that the eye is a literal camera.
Right.
You agree with that?
Oh, of course. But here's my contention, is that everywhere you look in this universe, we see design or order.
No, we don't.
Well, you don't, but I do.
Yeah, and
okay?
that's
and
why.
that comes
and
back
that's
to
my
what Matt was
contention.
saying.
Let him finish.
Let me finish. So, our most intelligent person on the face of this earth cannot create a grain of sand from nothing. We can't create a leaf, a flower, a bird, let alone an eye or a brain. So to say that all this nature, as you want to call it, came to being without a creative designer is to be disingenuous, because it cannot make itself. It's crazy to think that.
First of all, there's a huge fallacy there of saying that the smartest person can't make a grain of sand. I can't even begin to identify how much is actually wrong with that statement. But you're characterizing this as a creation from nothing still, and this all coming to being on its own. If we look at the universe, the limited understanding that we have so far, which is growing constantly, the best method that we have for understanding reality has been the scientific method, by and large. It's the single most reliable, consistent, self-correcting method for discerning truth. Now, if there's some other way of finding out the truth about reality, of course, we'd all be interested in knowing it. But when you say that the smartest person on the earth can't create a grain of sand, therefore, it must have been created by some other intelligence.
I actually didn't say that, Matt.
Well, you said it would be absurd to think that this came into its own.
Let me tell you what I said,
Sure.
so you can back up a little. The smartest person, most intelligent person on the face of this earth cannot create a grain of sand from nothing.
All right.
We can recreate what
Sure.
God's already given us. We can change it.
Well, we can modify.
We can modify
what
what's
exists.
already there.
Right.
But you are still just asserting that we are modifying things that God gave us, and
Yeah.
I'm saying, apart from your appeal to some special way of knowing, this direct revelation from God or direct experience with God, how else could we justify that? Because that could never, surely you would agree that your personal experience could not possibly be justification for somebody else.
Yeah, but let's go back to what we're talking about. Do you agree or don't you agree with me when I say the most intelligent person on the face of this earth cannot create a grain of sand, a leaf, a flower, or a bird, or a frog from nothing? We don't know where to start.
I agree
with that.
And I also say that 50,000 years ago, the most intelligent person on the face of the earth probably couldn't have created a cell phone from the actual pieces.
Yeah,
I don't know how that's relevant.
And the other thing, too, you mentioned the scientific method. Could you define that for me?
Well, there's a number of different definitions, but the guiding principle is that you begin with an observation, you develop a hypothesis, and then there's a process of testing and falsification, peer-reviewed research where others attempt to replicate your results and to falsify them to demonstrate, that we're constantly trying to prove that this is wrong. And then you get to the point where an hypothesis has graduated and becomes a theory, and it becomes the best current explanation possible. I noticed, there's been a lot of times where you've talked about the origin of the earth or evolution and any number of things where people who understand the subject much better than I do, and probably better than any in this room do, have corrected you on things, and yet the arguments your arguments remain the same. And I'm curious as to why that is. I mean, if for example, in your book, You Can Lead an Atheist to Evidence, but You Can't Make Him Think, you answered a question from an email that was, how old do you think the Earth is? And you essentially said you had no idea how old the Earth is, but science doesn't either. Or science has continually changed because, years ago they thought it was 100 million years, and now they're up to 4.5 billion years.
Right.
Well, science hasn't made any steps towards the absurd notion that it's 6,000 to 10,000 years old. And at each stage, the date was the best available. We are building on knowledge as we're standing on the shoulders of giants, seeing further all the time. And so the idea that science hasn't any idea or any good idea about how old the Earth is just demonstrably wrong.
Could it change over the next 100 years?
Will the date become more precise over the next 100 years?
Yes.
Quite possibly, if we get additional information.
So that means at the present day, our modern dating could be wrong, more than likely.
Yes.
So
however,
therefore, science doesn't know how old the Earth is.
Well,
we could be wrong.
You're still referring to know as an assertion of absolute certainty, and science doesn't do that, and no rational person should, outside of a handful of things that we can be absolutely certain about. Our own existence and direct experience things. You're saying that science doesn't know just because it hasn't come up with a firm date that the Earth is.
That's right. It could change by 1 billion years in the next 100 years easily.
Yeah, but it's not going to go down to 6,000 to 10,000 years. I mean, that's incredibly unlikely.
But I didn't say that.
I understand, but what you're presenting is that as long as you can't be absolutely certain about something, every answer is just as good as any other. That if science isn't absolutely certain to the minute or second about how old the Earth is, that an answer of 4,000 to 6,000 years, 6,000 to 10,000 years, is equally viable as one that's 4.5 billion years, and that's just simply not true.
No, I didn't say that, and I didn't say if science can't be.
I know you didn't say it. That's the implication.
To the second or the minute, I'm saying you guys changed by the billions.